The university started as a place where you read, and that was because that's where the books were. And for the last, what,
Right.
700 years or so, it has been a place. It has been a centrality because media has been centralized. And yes, we've invented printing presses, but it was expensive. It still is expensive because of our wonderful economy of scholarly publication, um, to have all of these publications. And so there's a logic to having it in a place, but technology doesn't
Correct.
require that anymore. So, what other characteristics of the university require it to have a place?
Mm. Mm.
And to what extent is that even true now? I mean, to what extent? So, first of all, you have to break it down. I think you can't discuss this without breaking it down into two different questions. One is research, and one is teaching and learning. And they have intersections, but they are not the same thing, and they do not have the same purpose in terms of what we see, what society sees a university as doing. And so, on the research side, we already have a lot of decentralized research going on. I mean, chances are, if you're working on very advanced research, probably 80% of the colleagues you're working with are at a different university, and you're
Sure.
communicating
Sure.
with them remotely in some form, fashion, through emails, through
Right.
video,
Skype
whatever. Yeah.
video.
So, because the problems of the world don't tend to concentrate only in Cambridge, Massachusetts anymore.
Right. And if
Uh,
you discover something in Cambridge, it should apply to everywhere else.
right. Exactly. And so that's the research question. And then there's the teaching and learning question.
Good point.
The role, the personal human role of the teacher. And that's something I think that in some ways requires more of a center
Hmm.
than I've always been a little bit. I, I think skeptical is the wrong word, but I think one of the limitations of distance education is the dehumanization of the relationship between the teacher and the student. And I know people will say, "Oh, well, I do this and that and the other," but at the end of the day, being in a room with somebody across a table from them, interacting with them in a very personal manner, is hard to replicate.
I
Maybe with
was
VR, maybe, but I don't know. We don't know that yet.
I
So,
was yesterday. I was on Georgetown's campus, and we had a big conversation about teaching with technology. And one philosopher raised a good question. He said he didn't think that teaching face to face, the learning experience, was about intimacy. He said that it could be about joy and the aha moment. And in his view, he thought it was possible that it was really hard to achieve that online. I thought that was an interesting point.
mhm.
That through video, through VR, I think we can do a lot of that. We can really, but it's still. I think that's an interesting point. It may be that that's kind of what we'd like to have.
So
Um,
if the university has no center, you can
yeah.
deconstruct it in 100 different ways.
Yes.
And so that changes the dynamic in a way that hasn't been possible until maybe the last 10 to 20 years. And it may we may be still at a point where we're still at that transition point.
Well, let me give you a little bit more to chew on with that. We have a great question that came in from Charles Findlay, and here, actually, interesting example what you said about research. Charles is in the Boston area. You're in Texas. I'm in DC. And we are smoothly having this conversation. Charles says, "I like the idea of the Nomad University. I would also consider ways to respond to the climate emergency. How to reduce the use of the physical plant dependence on fossil fuels." Oh, great
Hmm.
point. Great point. Uh,
Of course, the problem with the Nomad University is, as you describe it, I have not read the book, is that it does involve travel. And, we saw, was it Emma Thompson got into trouble for saying she flies? You know?
yes.
So until we have that electric 737, uh,
And
you
I
know,
understand. Um, well, we have along those lines, we have another follow-up question here from the awesome Ophelia Mangan. Let me bring this up. Who says, "Has anyone tuned into the Minerva project?" And that's an interesting example of the Nomad University, where it's got that idea where you have face to face, but that alternates with people being literally all over the world.
mhm.
No, that's
Yeah.
a really good point. And yes, by the way, we are trying very, very hard to get Minerva on this program, and we will succeed in doing that. And if you haven't had a chance to read the book, Minerva shows up on page 88 in the Nomad chapter. Um, well, speaking of nomads, I think I can rescue Professor Staley from being trapped in a technological whirlpool in Ohio. And let me see if I can bring him up. And in the
I
meantime,
will check. I will bow out to the
oh,
guest of honor.
just for now, but
Yeah.
we want you to come back because I really appreciate all of your ideation along those lines. And thank you, Tom. All right. David, can you hear and see us? Give it a second here. Hello, how's your connection?
You apparently can't hear me.
I can hear you now.
Good. No,
Excellent.
about 10 minutes before we came, I mean, everything was running smoothly, and then everybody ran out of internet across the
Whoa,
campus. We're assuming
whoa,
a denial of service attack here at Ohio State.
whoa, oh, yike. Oh, I'm so sorry, but I'm glad you're okay. Is any other sign of damage to infrastructure or anything else?
Well, because it's summer, that's when the construction happens, and so we're assuming
Ah,
that is the cause. So,
that makes sense. I think probably some of you here on this call may have been in similar situations.
uh,
I was
well,
on this.
everyone then is asking, can we go home? We can't do our work now.
That's always the problem, right? Well, I'm glad that you stayed there, and I'm glad that you stayed there for us.
And I'm glad you stayed. I was concerned that you decide there are other things to do rather than sit around and wait for someone from Columbus to join.
Well, as a University of Michigan graduate, my instinct is to make fun of Ohio, but in all seriousness, this is a community-based project. This is a discussion-based project. We have more than 50 folks around this virtual table, and so we have a lot of ideas and conversations. So we're ready to do that. But now we're glad to welcome you as the guest of
Thank you.
honor. And just to begin with, I introduced you very, very briefly, and I mentioned your book. But as a way of introducing you further to people, let me ask, what does the rest of 2019 hold for you? Are you going to be teaching this fall? Are you going to be running one of your centers? Are you going to be writing a new book, on a book tour for your current book? What's the rest of the year look like for you?
Yes, and yes.
All of the above.
Yes. So all sorts of obligations as director of the Humanities Institute. Among other things, we're just beginning to organize a symposium that we're calling a strategy for the humanities. And the idea here is a conference or symposium that aims to sort of push back against the humanities are in crisis narrative, rather than sort of taking it and accepting it. How do we change that conversation? And so we're imagining a symposium that includes not just academics, but because we're here in the state capitol, we want to bring in politicians, we want to bring in business leaders, we want to bring the nonprofit sector, and to have a general conversation. I'll be teaching two classes, both on our historical methods, our introduction to historical methods course, which I love teaching. Yes, talks. The talks are starting to line up around this book, and trying to finish writing another book on historical imagination.
Oh, great. Well, I'm a big admirer of your previous book about applying history to the future. I think that was the first way I got to meet you, and I look forward to your next one. Friends, if you're new to the forum, if you haven't participated in it, what happens is I ask a couple of questions, and I have hundreds in mind, but then the key thing is for you all to ask questions and to make comments. You saw from Tom Hames how easily it was that he could just step on stage and speak. And you already saw that somebody else was able to share text. So please, as we go, please throw your questions up. Don't let me hog the mic. This is all about you. This is a community-based program. My first question that I have to ask is about your book, which I enjoyed immensely. And I love the huge spirit of creativity and imagination, how you just break the mold with so many ways of how colleges and universities could be different. So my first question I've got to ask is, how'd you do it? What was your method for generating campus after campus of the future?
Boy, no one's asked me that question yet. That's really that's interesting. So you said imagination, and I've been reading the work of Ronald Barnett, the philosopher of higher education, Ronald Barnett, who, at least in a couple of books, has said that our ideas about what universities can become are hopelessly impoverished, and we need to be generating new ideas for what universities can become. And then it was sort of full stop. And I was hungering for, well, give me some ideas. What would that look like? And so I sort of turned that into kind of an intellectual exercise for myself, and sort of jotting a few ideas down in a notebook. And I think the spirit of the place at which it came from was to sort of go back to a foundational question: why do we have universities at all? I'm not talking about what's the history of the university, the medieval university and Renaissance.
Right.
Why do we have universities at all and not something else, not some other kind of institution? And so I guess I sort of started from that vantage point. And then to build them, I held a number of design charrettes with a number of folks from across campus, from faculty and graduate students and others who are interested in higher education, or interested in design, or interested in history of higher education. And we just did a series of workshops. And I said, well, let's think this through. Here's a what if. Let's take Nomad University. If that's the way a university is organized, well, what would that mean? What would that mean for a student experience? What would that mean for how administration would function? And so we sort of grew it that way.
Nice. So the students and other people in the community participated in kind of collaboratively brainstorming and crowdsourcing this.
Yes. And any results are my own. I take full blame.
That's right. Well, the author has to. I mean, that's the way of it. Fantastic! What a great process. Well, then let me ask. This book has been out. You've gotten readers and readings. I'm curious. Hang on. We have Carlos. We need you to make sure that your mic and your camera are working so you can join us. Let's just try this again. See if that's up. Nope. You need to have your mic and camera on. Which of the future universities has gotten the most praise and attention from your readers so far?
Praise and attention. So probably Interface University, talking about AI, because I think that AI is sort of one of the concerns of the moment. And I think all of us in higher education need to be thinking about the implications of artificial intelligence for what it means to develop minds, especially as AI takes over a lot more skills and tasks that we assume one needs a college education to complete.
And it's interesting when we talk about AI. We often there's an awful lot of fear in the field. There's a lot of concern, a lot of dread. People are terrified of Skynet University. What are the positive features that your readers have seen so far?
My own sense is that AI is not going to eliminate all human tasks, and indeed, I think there's strong evidence to suggest that that uniquely human abilities, like sort of creativity, and I know there's a huge debate about whether or not AI or artificial intelligence can be creative. I think that the jury is still out. So creativity, imagination, play, sort of to evoke my Institute for Advanced Play. I think these things are still human abilities, but they're also the sorts of abilities that we tend to assign a secondary place within the contemporary university. When we talk about creativity and imagination, these sorts of things, if anything, we think of them as soft skills, and by virtue of calling them soft skills, we sort of assign them a secondary sort of place. Whereas I think that in the university of the future, especially in a world of AI, that those abilities are going to be sort of brought to the foreground rather than consigned to the background.
So in many ways, we could think of Interface University as soft skills U.
In one telling, sure, yes. The reason I called it Interface is that I really do think the future belongs to the working together of AI and human abilities, and what results from that interaction, from that interface. and that we as humans, as human thinkers, add a lot to the process. I think right now we're talking a lot about what can AI do? What can AI do better than we can do? There's still many things that we do significantly better than machines.
Well, and that's one way forward. Redesigning higher education based on what we do better than machines, what people do well. Friends, I wanted to ask for some questions and your comments along the way. Carlos, I think we still need to have the mic and camera on for that. Here, I'll ping you to see if you need any help with it. Ophelia Mangan shared with us an interesting example of a scholar working on AI-driven art. He's a Instagram artist with the handle Neurokinetics. So it's Neuro, Kinetikz. And I'll share that on Twitter for everyone to see.
Oh, okay.
So that's an interesting. And he also, I think, has another account called AI Art Shop, AI-art.shop. So, and there are more examples of that, indeed. Thank you, Ophelia.
I think as I was just coming on, someone had asked a question about Nomad University.
Yeah, that's how that was me. I was entirely to blame for that. I was excited by it and wanted to mention that as one example of the campuses you talked about. So tell us a bit about Nomad University.
Well, I guess the idea came in just reading some of the studies, some of the literature about the positive effects of a gap year between high school and college. And that students who take a gap year come to university more mature, more experiences. They perform better academically, and so again, it was part of the imaginative what if mode I was in to sort of say, well, if the gap year it has such terrific outcomes, well, what if you had that as the university experience, and then sort of build off of that? What is it that we could be doing? What kind of experience or what kind of education would you have if traveling the globe were the central feature of it, and not just something that's done in a sort of a study abroad at the end of one semester sort of thing?
Nice. So it's almost like gap year college.
And I know someone I think just as I was coming on, someone mentioned Minerva, and Minerva I think sort of gestures in that direction. Although I think what Minerva are doing is slightly different from what I'm imagining with Nomad University. I mean, Minerva really is go and take classes in Madrid, go and take classes in Barcelona, go and take classes in the Gulf states, and that's terrific. I'm talking about not just simply taking courses, which could be done sort of anywhere, but engaging in experiences that are rooted in that particular place and can only be done in that particular place.
Did you ever see it was about 10 years ago, the World Bank funded a game called Urgent Evoke.
No.
It was designed by Jane McGonigal, who was a major figure in the gamification world. And the idea was that it was a web-based game that you would play. I don't know if anybody here on this conversation has played it, but you had a series of missions to complete. And on the web, you had all the instructions, and you had some characters to follow and some comics and that kind of thing. But all the missions involved going out into the world and doing something. They may or may not have involved technology. I mean, so one of them was to go find the watershed that you were in, what the nearest watershed was, and just quickly map it. Another was to find a community elder and ask them about some of their experience that they thought applied now, and so on. It was a really exciting project in a lot of ways, but I love the idea of creating a university along those lines. But before I go further, we have more questions. We have Professor Baldridge from Middlebury College. So let me just put this question up. And she asks, I agree that higher ed struggles with the creativity and imagination that we need to adapt to a challenging future. How can we create cultures that develop the capacity for institutional imagination? And Professor Baldridge, if you want to join us on stage, if you've got a mic and camera on, just hit the podium button and we can follow up. Here, I'll put the question back up because it was a deep one. So how do we create cultures that develop the capacity for institutional imagination? Well, and Professor Baldridge, I think we need your camera and mic to be up. They both seem to be off right now. So what do you think, David?
this is such a good question, and and I think part of my hesitation or fumbling to find an answer is I think that institutions are different from each other. So my sense is that there are some institutions where there is a culture of innovation that, and I don't mean to misspeak anything about my institution because I love Ohio State and I love teaching here, but I wouldn't necessarily call it a culture of institutional innovation. Maybe if we were having this conversation, I don't know, at Arizona State, we might be finding this.
I see what you mean. I see what you mean.
And one of the, so I've been asked a similar question, not nearly as deep as this one. The question I have been asked before is, well, how could you actually make one of these institutions happen? And what I've been thinking about is a pre-existing institution developing what amounts to a university incubator. And so we have business incubators attached to universities. What if we had something that was a university incubator, where you would sort of create like these experiments or proofs of concept? So we're going to create a little Nomad University here at, say, Ohio State, right? And and not 3,000 students, but maybe 25 students and a few faculty, and sort of build a small working model of that. And then we'll build a working model of Polymath University. That would be a way of sort of developing sort of a skunkworks within an existing institution, where all you need really is a committed number of people as opposed to trying to influence an entire culture. I think innovating an entire institution is really challenging.
So a key way of doing this is to start small and to pilot.
Yes, this is the way businesses are formed. We have tech incubators sort of on the fringes of Ohio State's campus, and they all begin small. 1 or 2 people in a 500 square foot office. And they're incubated and capitalized and built from that.
Makes me think of skunkworks.
Exactly, that's exactly it. Yes.
Professor Baldridge, that's a great question. One of the great questions we're at time. We have another one that came in from the awesome Keisa Johnson, who asks straight up, what type of forecasting tools do you use?
For this book or generally? I assume for this book.
Let's start with this book. And Keisa, if you want to add more, please add more.
Because this book in some ways was a departure for me in terms of my futuring work. So I use a lot of the methods that, and I know, Brian, you use and are familiar with, especially around scenario construction.
Yep. So
environment scanning, trend assessment, implications assessment, and then building scenarios. And that's really sort of defined my work when I'm doing futuring work. And so those are meant to be sort of plausible scenarios for what the world might look like or might be. What I was trying to do in this book is something I've never really tried before, which is visioning, which is about preferred futures. And I think that's the technique that I was using here. But I really do think of each one of these as I don't think necessarily they're tied to specific trends. They are descriptions of a university I would like to see, rather than one I think is going to be supported by what the trends are saying.
So preferred futures rather than a simple extrapolation.
Or another way is idealized design. That's a technique I've used before, where you start with your sort of ideal future and then work your way back to the present. What do you need to have in order for that future to occur? Right,
that works. Carlos, we can see you. All right, good to see you. Welcome.
So I'm in a more boots on the ground job than the one we're discussing. So I make online MOOCs. I'm involved in trying to get faculty to use these technologies. And my mantra has always been like, where's the low-hanging fruit? So when you mentioned this incubator, or, the analogy is to like a Silicon Valley company, like that's kind of in the right space in my view. I'm always trying to think like what's already kind of possible with the tools we've got that just need to be reconfigured in a way that enables people to do something, have a win, and think, oh, I should do this at every conference, or I should find a way to do this in my class. Or, as the community becomes more familiar with the ways you could break open the classroom or wherever you want to talk about it, it no longer seems like something that has high risk. And so my question is kind of for you, maybe pick actually your university, particularly because you don't think it's a hotbed of innovation. Like, what is something that other humanities professors try? When they try it, they discover, in fact, how it enables them to teach things that they couldn't do before, or opens up the conversation, makes it more interactive. What's something that's like a win that people could duplicate, without, you don't even have to license anything. All the tools are already there. You just use them differently.
Right. And when I talk about a culture of innovation in Ohio State, I guess I'm talking broadly about institutional innovation.
Right.
I can point to the kinds of innovations that you're talking about. In fact, we just had this week our Innovate conference, which is about
good conference.
classroom technology in particular. I think my colleague, you mentioned the humanities. I think my colleagues in the digital humanities are doing lots of interesting work, and I've only just and I've been interested in this in the longest time, and I can't understand why I haven't learned about this sooner. We have an initiative here called Buckeye VR, and we're actually creating modules. At this stage, they'd be more like modules or lesson plans that use VR for different topics. So let's go listen to Martin Luther King, speak at the Washington Monument, that sort of thing, or at the Lincoln Memorial. And so I'm really sort of jazzed by that. And I absolutely agree that the idea of starting small is the way to achieve this sort of change. You still require capitalization. You still require champions to sort of create such centers and such spaces. Yes. But it's been done before. One of the examples I give in the book is the University of Wisconsin in the 1920s. Alexander Michaeljohn, who was the president of Brown, left Brown to go to Wisconsin to create the experimental college, which was a great books college inside Wisconsin. And so, again, there's all sorts of historical precedent for this sort of behavior.
In my world, I just finished a meeting literally before this started with some students that are in a class on infectious disease, and the faculty member just asked them to create, like, instead of their profile of the disease, which is what they've been doing for years, they still do it, like a 2-minute video where that could be packaged, say, with a mentor that works for USAID, and it could show people dramatically in the field, what are the risks of schistosomiasis or some other disease that's endemic in Kenya, and the main difference is that the students have the kind of native skill to make these videos. They've been doing it since high school, and they now, because they're at Stanford and have an expert that can vet the work they do, can actually authoritatively inform field workers, right? Yeah. There's all these giant, mass drug campaigns where rather than try and do diagnostics, they'll just try and give everyone the drug that's been offered by Pfizer, that kind of thing. So it's really a political, like the way vaccines are here. We don't see what they're doing to pick the vaccine every fall, but the machinery that makes it possible is institutional, it's subsidized, it's got vertical integration to roll it out every fall, all kinds of things. So making the students do work that's in new media or online has a much shorter learning curve. They're already 3/4 of the way there. Yeah. And they're already partnering with faculty who can then, actually make sure they're correct and add the authority of their position to the media. It's an example of an easy win. All I have to do is try and help them with the technology they're short on, or tell them a little bit about, how storytelling works. Like, how do you get this to be more engaging? But, it never gets scope. What you'd like it is to get the kind of scope that, I don't know, went probably in the 19th century when they decided everybody should have literacy or something like that. Yeah. It's a kind of media literacy.
So it's that the next step, going from pilot to a program, what Jeffrey Moore calls crossing the chasm. Carlos, thank you so much. And thank you for your patience in getting all the camera and microphone working. I'm delighted to see you.
Sure, thanks.
We have some more people coming up, so let me just bring to the screen. We have the awesome Laura Rosenzweig from the University of California. Oh, Laura, you need to unmute your mic. I think your mic is still muted. Make sure
There it
you.
goes. There's a little bit of a delay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. Hello.
Very interesting
Welcome.
topic, David, and I'm really looking forward to reading your book. I work in the office of the president for a very large state university system, which is Research One institution. And so, we work in an initiative to try to innovate instruction through online teaching and learning. And we have just had 5 years of trying to we have such struggles in trying to get one calculus department, for example, at the university, at one of our UC campuses, to articulate an online course in the same subject matter, say in calculus, that's offered by a different UC campus. I mean, that has been years of struggle. So my question to you was, I tend to be a little bit facetious, but what is the motivation? I mean, I think you're absolutely right on in terms of imagining these things, but we're having such a problem with the entrenched culture in these institutions, and I'm wondering what is the motivation for an institution. This goes back to your comments about the incubator to engage in this thinking at all. I'm wondering if projects like the Minerva project, I wonder whether you have to start from scratch in order to really realize this, because waiting for the entrenched institutions might be a lifetime. I don't know.
So I'm sorry, Brian, were you going to say something or?
No, I was just admiring the question.
No, I did. No, it's and Laura, I think you diagnosed. The issues quite effectively. I really do think that it is a challenge for existing institutions to change, not just simply to change to sort of radical ideas, but I mean, think of the sort of change that like University of Central Florida has gone through over the last 20 years or so.
Yeah.
20 years or so, I mean, to become a research university. I mean, those are significant challenges. And in fact, one of the things I say in the book is that because of that, it probably, I mean, if we're going to see anything like these institutions, they probably will be. You probably will have to start from scratch, I think. And there's a certain amount of historical precedent for that too. Now, having said that, there are historical examples of institutions that transformed into something else. Harvard wasn't born a research university; that was something that transpired over time. But again, that is just simply not an easy process. I think I don't know if I articulate it in the book, but as I think about it, and as I think about the question you raised. I'm not certain that the audience, maybe the audience for the book includes every institution, but I think that maybe some institutions are hearing this more than others. And so as I'm getting reactions, I'm getting emails from people, it tends to be, and I'm not going to mention specific names or specific institutions, but they tend to be from institutions that are struggling, I guess, not yet to the queen sacrifice, to use Brian's excellent term, but who see pressures, who see challenges that are enrollment driven, and are thinking, maybe we need to be thinking differently about who we are. So the way I conclude the book is talking about differentiation. That I think it's a significant challenge right now in higher education is the lack of differentiation among many institutions. Now, not University of California institutions, not Ohio State, and again, I'm not going to mention names, but we know these institutions where their offerings look the same as their competitors down the street, and their marketing looks identical, and they compete in the same athletic conferences, and in many ways, what they're doing is competing on price. And I think that for some institutions, differentiation of the kind I'm describing here is going to be a direction that some of these institutions will go.
Well, those are great answers. I like how you go from aspiration and excitement to terror and dread. Thank you so much, Laura.
Thanks, David. Thanks.
University of California system is terrific. Yeah. We have more questions just piling in, and And friends, again, if you want to join us on stage, you see how easy it is. We have a question from Robin. Forgive me if I mispronounce this. I'm going to say Bajan, or perhaps if it's American, Bajent. She's an associate professor, and the question is, chapter 2 of your book discusses micro-colleges. I see that as being very important in the future. I now have your book on order, but would like to know more about what you have in mind by micro-colleges.
Boy, I'm just delighted at your response to that, Robin. That's terrific. So I have a colleague who's a futurist, a higher education futurist, who got me interested in the idea of micro schools, which became a Silicon Valley trend, I think, a couple of years ago. But based on the idea that that schooling that schools are more effective if instead of being 1,000 or 2,000 students, that are more on the scale of 100, 150 students. And so I started playing around with that idea, and in fact, there is some historical precedent for education on that sort of scale, on the scale of even less than 100 students. So micro college, if you haven't read the book yet, is based on the idea that a college consists of 1 faculty and 20 students.
That's it.
And again, if that idea sounds sort of strange, there actually is at least one university or a college in this country that has something like that. That's Deep Springs College in the Sierra Nevadas. They have 27 students. Yes, they have 27 students. But another precedent for that includes the Indian system of education prior to the British Raj, but the guru system, where you literally have one guru and 20 disciples, 20 students. But another example, I don't think I mentioned in the book, but another example I draw from is from Abraham Flexner, long before he became the first director of the Institute for Advanced Study in 1939. He began his educational career in Louisville, running what amounted to a tutoring service, or an after-school tutoring service. And what he promoted was, you work with me, I will get your son, mostly son, I will get your son into a big East Coast elite college. And he worked with 11 students at a time. And there's also a long history of tutors, for instance. And this is the way the elite would have been educated in Europe. You would have had a personal tutor. So there's a long history of education on this sort of scale. And in fact, if you look at the beginnings of American colleges, many of them began as the university president and a few students. And so again, there's lots of historical precedent for this. But the chapter mostly talks about the advantages of education of that scale versus a place like Ohio State, where we have 58,000 students or such, that has its own sort of advantages, but there are advantages of small scale as well.
Oh, terrific. Thank you for the.
It's the kind of college I would like to start tomorrow. If
I can hear that.
That's the one I'd like to start tomorrow.
I'd love that. And thank you, Robin Bajent, for the really, really good question. We have more questions coming in just out of the woodwork. And let me bring up one from Daniel at DePaul. Daniel Stanford asks, have you heard much about virtual exchange initiatives? We've had some great results with courses that include online collaborations between our students and students at foreign universities.
I don't know much about them. I mean, from the description, I understand what the initiative is, but I've never heard of virtual exchanges. Be interested in hearing more.
Daniel, if you'd like, you can either through the text, you can send us a link to an example, or you could join us in video if you like. Just click the raised hand, or in fact, I'll put up a podium so that you can do that. We have more questions coming too. Here comes Daniel. Daniel, welcome.
Am I coming through okay?
Beautifully. Great sound.
Good. I'm sure. I know you, Brian, you're normally great about doing a hard stop at 2, so I don't want to take up a ton of time.
Thank you.
But I just wanted to mention, so at DePaul University, where I work, we're doing a virtual exchange initiative. We call it Global Learning Experience here. But at the SUNY system, the State University of New York system, they have something called the COIL Center that really was a pioneer in this space. So sometimes people refer to it as COIL, or Collaborative Online International Learning. And it just basically supports faculty in creating collaborations with faculty at foreign universities so that our students and their students can do collaborative research or debates or all kinds of projects together as part of their regular coursework.
What sorts of outcomes and effects do you find?
Well, I mean, ours has been running for about 5 years. And I mean, as you might imagine, initially it was a little rough. There's a lot you learn the hard way through technology issues, instructional design support, faculty relationship building, all of that. But it's gotten a lot better. And right now we're really trying to evaluate students changing perspectives in terms of openness and awareness of cultural differences, how much the experience influences their willingness to want to go abroad or want to, or feeling more prepared to work with people from other cultures, which we think is a big plus when they get into interviews. And we're seeing better and better results with that lately.
That's fascinating.
Well, when I read your question, Daniel, I had a completely different idea in mind. There are.
You really do.
Oh, I hope that's a good thing at times. There's the Council of Independent Colleges organized a series of multi-campus upper-level humanities seminars. They'd be taught ultimately, I think the biggest size was 13 different colleges. But so if you're a professor at one school and you're teaching a class, Byzantine art was one that really caught my eye. It's a kind of class where you could maybe do an independent study in a small college. But if you could have one student here, one student there, two students there, soon you have a full seminar.
Right.
And that's why I thought you were talking. But this is a
it's another great idea, and kind of connects to that idea of leveraging resources at multiple institutions. In our case, we're just always looking for it to have an intercultural, international component. And we have a lot of students who don't think of study abroad as it being something they can afford or something that's for them. They just feel like an outsider to that space. And this is a nice way to kind of whet their appetite for a traditional study abroad experience.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
We are. I appreciate the reminder of the chronology. We are coming close to the end of the hour, and we have a couple more thoughts that have come up already. One actually is a kind of placeholder. We have Gregory Schuckman, who is the assistant vice president at University of Central Florida. Just wanted to say he's at UCF, and so he'd be happy to provide more context. So. That's Gregory Schuckman, Schuckman. Thank you, Greg. Greg came in on his vacation to say that, which is above and beyond the call of duty. Ophelia Mangan shares here. Let me see if I can bring this up. She asks a question about consortia doing this kind of innovation. So rather than just one individual campus, to have multiple campuses. And then she points out, as you can see here on the screen, the New York City New Lab, Mozilla's Hive, the NYU Center for Urban Science and Progress. What do you think about the possibilities of intercampus, multi-campus consortia for doing this kind of creative work?
So yes, always possible. My hesitation only comes from my own hesitation from years of working in various consortia about how effective consortia can oftentimes be. So I used to teach at a small college before I came to Ohio State, and we were a member of a consortium, and it was always with a certain amount of suspicion. Right? We were all competitors with each other. So I think when consortia work, they can be very effective, very effective. And I'm certain the examples given there are best case, are best practices. But I do have that one hesitation about consortia, I guess.
Understood. We have an example of a successful consortium that we've been following very closely on the Future Trends Forum. We've had the Unison Consortium's founder on twice, and we'll have their CEO on this fall, just as a look ahead. But yeah, I spent a lot of time in the consortium space. I know how challenging it can be. We've got to get this working better, I think. Friends, we're right at the end of the hour. Let me just ask one last question to point things ahead. Professor Staley, thinking about the next 5 years of higher ed, where are you looking for the real creative strides forward? Are there any particular geographical areas or institutional types, any people that you think we should really be paying attention to, the ones who are the most creative, who are really pushing alternative universities ahead?
5 years.
Mm-hmm.
So necessity is the mother of invention. So I've just been in conversation with a dean at a small private liberal arts college who is very, very keen to not just simply to explore ideas in this book, but other sorts of ideas. And it's done with a sense of not panic. That's not the word I want to use, but with a deep understanding of the challenges facing the small institutions, and frankly, I think facing all of us. And he was talking in particular about demographics. There's just going to be a smaller number of traditional age, 18 to 22-year-old students, and that his institution needs to start thinking differently, creatively about who their students are, how they reach out to different students. What I'm trying to convey in the book is to not just simply organize a university differently, but to really think imaginatively about the outcomes and about the reason for being, the raison d'etre for a university. And the thing I point to is the most innovative universities are ones that present a new or distinct transformative experience. And I think there are too many cases right now where when we talk about innovation, we're really talking about delivery and we're talking transactional experiences. And so I think where I'm looking are those institutions that really produce something that's transformative. Minerva, I think, is thinking along these lines. What they're doing is not just a question of delivery; it is a truly transformative experience for students.
Transformation, not just
Transformational
tweaking. Well, I've got to ask, since we're at the end of time, thank you for that pointer ahead. And we should definitely look for adversity as a mother of invention. Where can people find you besides obviously buying your awesome book? We should find you David Staley 8 at Twitter.
David Staley 8. I'm happy to give out my email too. Happy to continue conversation. So I'm Staley, Staley, Staley.3 at osu.edu. And as long as my internet is working, I'll be able to email.
Well, try and keep all of those giant tractors from knocking over any more infrastructure. Thank you so much for your really generous time. I really appreciate the way you responded to everyone's questions, and I'm really just delighted to see the furious vision that you described. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the invitation, and thanks to everyone for the thoughtful and thought-provoking questions.
Well, we're gonna follow up with your next book, I promise.
Thank you.
Thank you. In the meantime, friends, don't go yet. Let me just point you to next week, where we have a really amazing guest. We have Kevin Guthrie. He's the we have the bio blurbs are switched. Kevin's the president of Ithaca, which is the wonderful operation in New York that, among other things, runs JSTOR, along with other great projects. They do fantastic research and development. They're a really important group. And he has a new article on the challenges facing higher education, which is one of the best, most succinct, most wide-ranging, and really thought-provoking that we've seen yet. Kevin's a truly extraordinary figure in higher education. I'm really looking forward to seeing him here next week. Now, we also have our book club plunging towards the dark finale of the age of surveillance capitalism. Every day, we are seeing news stories that confirm or push back at Zubov's thesis. Please join us on the book club to see more. We've been posting lots and lots of reading information, lots of discussion, and the book club has just been advancing. This is an amazing, very powerful book, one of the great ones for our time. Now, if you'd like to grab that book, or if you'd like to grab Professor Staley's book, head to our bookstore, the only bookstore that's devoted to the future of education and technology. If you'd like to keep a conversation going, we're still all over social media. On Twitter, just use the hashtag FTTE. You can find our groups on Slack, LinkedIn, and Facebook, and keep it going. Otherwise, we'll see you next week. Until then, thank you very much for your time. Looking forward to it. Bye-bye.